Welcome back. As we said in our intro, one of our main segments in this episode of our breakfast show is going to tackle women in ancient Egypt. As women is really nowadays maybe the very first to sacrifice to have all the battles and all the challenges we are facing nowadays. Also, in ancient Egypt, it was not a less important role. And to shed more light on that, we are very much delighted to have with us live here in the studio our dear guest, Mrs. Yomna Salama, our Egyptologist, and who is going to answer all our questions about this very important topic. A very good morning to you, ma'am.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Women in ancient Egypt. Let's have a quick preview first, a panoramic view before going from the general to the specific.
Well, women in ancient Egypt were considered the source of life. And they actually enjoyed so many rights compared to other ancient civilizations like the Greek and the Roman. And this is actually was mentioned by Herodotus, the Greek historian. When he came to Egypt, he was impressed by how the status of women in ancient Egypt and how many rights they enjoyed. And also, it's very important that this is actually very well documented. So on the walls of the temples, the tombs, you see lots of scenes to ensure this status of women. They are highly ranked, they are cherished, and also they are considered the source of life. When you see the famous sign of life, which is called the Ankh, that we call it today the key of life, actually it represents the womb of a woman as a source of life. And this is generally, they enjoyed rights, they had many professions, equality, freedom.
Professions, let's talk about this in more details. What about the professions the Egyptian woman was able to have, or the positions she occupied?
Well, the average Egyptian woman, of course, the main duty for her was supporting her husband or the male in the fields. As we were back then, 1,000 years ago, 80% is agriculture society. So that was one of the main positions, that she's working in the field side by side. And actually, we do have some photos here to show the women working, if we can see the photos, working side by side, equal. They can do the textiles, they can work in making beer and wine, selling and buying in the market. This is for the average woman. However, the highly educated ones had also, here for example, we have one of the famous queens, Merit Amun. But if we will come back to the photos and then see more about the professions. They reached high ranks to be a priestess, to be a judge in court, a physician, even a queen.
We know about,
Nefertiti, for example, one of the famous women in ancient Egypt, the wife of King Akhenaten, and she played a very important role during the time of her husband and even after his death. So we can see, for example, the next photos. Musicians. Women were also musicians and dancers, and that's not just for entertaining. Actually, they had to go to schools to learn, like today.
Was this included into the rites in the temples, for example?
Yes, of course, indeed, yeah. Also to the level of, you mentioned earlier, apart from the positions, how they were highly ranked, you can see female goddess. Deities, exactly. Very important, like Sekhmet, like Hathor, like Isis, or Isis, like Nephthys, Serket, Neith. All those are here, for example, she's behind her husband in a hunting and fishing scene. The scene we see now, the woman is accompanying the husband. Even in some cases, we found in the tomb of the mother of King Ahmose some military weapons. Ahmose.
What was her name?
I don't recall her name exactly, but
wife of Sekhnin Ra?
No, yes, the mother of Ahmose.
Wife of Sekhnin Ra, mother of Kamos and Ahmose.
Exactly. In her tomb, we found
Iyahotep.
Exactly. Yes. Iyahotep, you're right. I was recalling the name. Iyahotep. In her tomb, we found the weapons, military weapons, which means that she actually accompanied the troops and led some of the troops during the war against the Hyksos when they actually threatened Egypt and occupied Egypt for some time.
Yeah, and you know, one of the main important things which I was really proud of being an Egyptian when I was reading about it, how Ramses II, for example, was writing some poems for his beloved wife, and just to say this is the one who the sun was rising for.
Yes.
I mean, something like that was happening here in Egypt thousands of years ago.
Yes.
And this is the way the husbands were looking at their wives, even if he was a king and she was his queen. How do you see women in our literature?
Well, actually, this is a very good topic, and I actually brought with me some of the beautiful literature in ancient Egypt, talking specifically about women and even the mother, since we just celebrated yesterday the Mother's Day.
Yeah.
So allow me to read it here for you.
Sure.
For example, the Vizier Ptah Hotep in the Middle Kingdom, he was talking and he said, if you want to be a successful man, love your wife and prepare a house and take a lady to be the lady or the master of your heart. Feed her enough, protect her back, give her perfume, ointments and oils as they are the medicine for her heart and soul. So trying to tell the man how to treat a woman and how to give her gifts and so on. And he wraps this up by saying, make her heart happy as long as you shall live. She shall be a fertile field for her man. And then he comes to the part of warning him and telling him, don't let the fights and arguments between you reach court. Then you will see a storm from her eyes. This part actually means that if the arguments and the problems between you and your woman reach the court, she will get her rights.
Yeah.
A storm from her eyes, it means that she will get her rights. And this is, by the way, very important, because women in ancient Egypt were allowed to speak for themselves in court. Unlike the Greek and the Roman, where they had to have someone to represent them, a male to represent them. But in ancient Egypt, the woman speaks freely, enters the court and speaks for herself. And another part here talking about the mother, from a different one, he's saying, don't forget to double the bread for your mother. Carry her as she carried you after birth. She gave you her breast or breastfeeded you for 3 years. She never got disgusting from cleaning your waist. She taught you everything about life. And if you get married, put all these things in front of your eyes and beware that she becomes upset from you and she raises her hands to the gods and they listen to her prayers against you. Exactly like what a mother will tell her kids today, don't make me upset or don't make me sad, I will pray to God. Exactly the same value here and there, although there is a difference of...
Have you found all this on papyri or on the walls of the temples or in both?
Ptah Hotep papyrus, we found on the walls of temples, of course. There is a famous papyrus called Wilbur papyrus, and this is in this...
And the stories on the temples
and the stories, of course, and the love story, like you mentioned, between Ramses II and his most beloved wife.
The sun rises for her. I mean, I cannot find a better word to describe how much this one was in love with his wife. And we're talking about Ramses II, one of the most important pharaohs ever.
One of the strongest, most important, long-ruling pharaoh as well. So, and he built a temple for her.
The one who defeated the Hittites was the one who was that romantic, so?
The one who actually also played a very important diplomatic role, and we cannot ignore...
Signing the first accord, peace accord.
Peace, yes. First peace treaty in history, written one.
Yes.
And his wife actually played a very important role in this. So they were
from a powerful position. After defeating them in Qadesh, he was able to do that.
The records of Qadesh actually are different between the different resources, but the end of the story here, that they managed to have the peace treaty.
Treaty.
This is very, it was years of war, and from Egyptian sources different from the other, from the enemy's source, but the end, we made peace, and it was Ramses who made this peace. So it's very.
Let's return back to our queens, because I'm really biased when it comes to women, and particularly in ancient Egypt. Queen T, for example,
yes,
this
wife
powerful
of
figure.
III.
Yeah, Amenhotep the third, father of Amenhotep the fourth, or Akhenaten.
Yes.
And you know, the syllable Nefer means
beautiful.
Beautiful. So
yes.
Nefertiti is the beautiful came, or
yeah.
Al-Jamila Atat.
Yeah.
Nefert,
the beauty
Nefertari, the beauty.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. Let's have
like
a quick
today,
look at,
by the way, we say Gamila.
I wanted to make this
link.
Yeah.
Today we say Gamila, which means beautiful. Gamalat. There's a girl called Halawethum in the countryside.
Yes.
So all this is coming from an ancient Egyptian traditions. Like the women will have a name to reflect such an adjective. We have Nofret, the wife of Rahotub. We have Nefertiti. We have Nefertari. Also, the point here is not just giving the name with this, but also to show how they cherished and how women were important in the society. And related to that, Ramses III, by the way, he gave them the right to travel without a companion. So she can travel, which was still, to a very recent time, not allowed in many of the countries today, in the 21st century.
And to add to what or to echo what you're saying, we cannot miss speaking about Hatshepsut, for example.
Of course.
And to know that she was the very first queen to send expeditions to Punt and
lands,
to have this kind of exchange, commercial
yes.
exchange, and to bring from their spices and stuff like that. And I mean, how was this, or how this is considered as of a very modern way for an Egyptian queen.
Indeed, and not just an Egyptian queen, a queen ruling a great kingdom in a very important time. We're talking about the New Kingdom time, when actually the territories of the Egyptian lands were extended, and the demands and the duties she had upon her shoulders were not actually easy ones. And she managed to rule the country in a very diplomatic way. The time of Hatshepsut, she did not go into one single war with nations for 20 years, which actually the New Kingdom time is called the golden age for the military, for the ancient Egyptian military and campaigns and wars. And that's what her followers did, and the ones before her. But she actually managed to have this peaceful time. She did lots of projects in the country, so people had opportunities to work. The building of the temples, the cutting of the obelisks, all this, the Punt expedition, commercial relationships and economical relationships with other countries, all this is documented on the walls of her temple in Deir al-Bahari, the west bank of Luxor, and everything she brought back from the Punt lands. And in addition to all that, she was a lady. Everybody talks about Hatshepsut dressing like a male, like a pharaoh, but she was a woman at the end of the day.
By the end of the day, yes.
She had her family, she had her daughter, she had love. She had a man who loved most probably her architect or engineer, Senmut, after the death of her husband. So Hatshepsut, even when you look to her statues, you find that the features are very feminine.
Yeah.
Apart that she's dressed like a male, but her features are very feminine ones.
Yeah. And also, since we are speaking about our great civilization and particularly about women, we cannot skip speaking about Isis.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not going to ask any questions.
When,
Would you please elaborate?
we talk about the supreme goddess of protection, and we mention Isis, the symbol of love, the symbol of sacrifice, protection, motherhood, with Hathor, of course, sharing her. So choosing Isis as the supreme goddess of protection, and she's a female goddess. They could have chosen Horus or Ra or whatever, but here comes again.
No, I'd like to know more about how the Egyptians were looking at her, how she was considered a deity, a phenomenal woman. The idea itself.
The legend of Isis.
The legend itself.
And the legend is very, actually, it's a mix of a love of good fight between good and bad. It's a mix of giving rights, because the legend actually is very long. I don't know if we have time, but to wrap up the legend of Isis, she fell in love with Osiris, and there was a fight among the other brothers, like Set, who represented actually the evil and the bad. So here you see how the fight between Osiris and Set for this beautiful lady, and then at the end Osiris died, Set killed him. She did not actually surrender to the death of her husband, and she looked for him to gather all the pieces of his body again and to bring him back into life, and that's how Osiris became god of the underworld. And this scene is represented on the walls of the ancient Egyptian temples. Isis, with her love, with her protection, she managed to bring him back into life, and you see lots of scenes where she spreads her wings and she's wrapping her beloved husband Osiris, where he is shown as a mummy, because he came back to life, but not this life.
Yep.
And always in the scenes, like we will see some photos as well, Isis is breastfeeding the pharaoh.
Yeah.
He's sitting on her laps as a young child, and she is breastfeeding the pharaoh to get the holy milk. And this was a very popular scene in the ancient Egyptian temples when we talk about Isis.
When we talk also about, I think Isis is going to remain a
Motherhood,
source
she
of
gave-
inspiration even to the dramatists, to the writers.
Oh, of
And
course.
this is going to be forever a source of hundreds, if not thousands, of works of art. But let's return back, because this is very important, about the family bond.
Oh.
And how the Egyptian woman was the key word here. How she was able to have a family with very strong bond, binding or connecting the members of this family.
This is a very good question, because again, in the scenes and the statues, you find always the woman sitting side by side next to her husband on an equal level. So she's not smaller, like
Yep.
you see in some cases, which is actually related to the role the woman is playing in the scene. But in the daily life scenes and in the Egyptian art, to show this bonding in the family and to show how the woman is actually the backbone of the ancient Egyptian family until today. She is the backbone of the family, and she's always sitting here. If we move, this is again Sekhmet. We can.
We are going to move forward
Here,
with more photos.
yes, more
Yeah.
photos. Here, for example, she's sitting behind her husband and the children, 3 girls. She's sitting equally.
Yep.
Equally.
Yeah.
And in many cases, we can find that the woman is wrapping her or putting her arms around her husband in a very supportive and protective attitude. So she's not just like sitting like that. No, she's holding him very strong, very tight.
This one?
Here she's working with her husband
Yeah.
in the field. Same scene like you see today if you go to Egypt in the countryside.
The countryside.
Working side by side.
Side by side.
She's not sitting in the house like some people say women are sitting in the house. No, we were working side by side and harvesting. Here, for example, the queen you mentioned,
Yeah.
the one Queen T and her husband Amenhotep III. This is the largest statue in the Egyptian Museum in Tahrir, and 3 of their daughters. And closer, she's putting her arms around the back of her husband, sign of protection and also love and affect. This is one of my favorite pieces.
Yeah.
My favorite piece. You can talk for hours about Seneb. Seneb was the chief of dwarfs during the time of King Jedefra. Look at this, and please take care that equality and engaging the people of special needs in the ancient Egyptian society. They were actually, some of them were dancers and clowns in the palace, which is a profession. Others made it to be chief of all dwarfs, and they gained actually a prestigious status in the society. And the love relationship here, what would make a normal woman get married to a dwarf?
To a dwarf.
It must be love.
Yeah. Must be love.
His personality, his
You
character.
know, the word civilization, it's not coming just like that. The word civilization means a lot, and I think, in my humble opinion, of course, if you want to measure how this society is civilized, how this society is dealing with people with special needs,
Yes.
and how much people with special needs can lead even leading positions just with their determination, with their capabilities,
Sure.
and knowing well that they can do a lot to serve or to be integrated into this society.
You are very right, and we do have scenes like we show Seneb now, but we also have other dwarfs who reached high ranks. They were the king's tailors. They were working in jewelry because they can make their fingers are very tiny,
Yeah.
so they can make the tiny details in the jewelry. So they actually made it to very high positions, and this is how they were integrated in the society and enjoying their rights. This is again the musicians.
The musicians,
and
yeah.
one of them in the front is playing the harp.
Harp.
And again, they need to go for a school to know how to play. Here, look the beautiful way she's wrapping her hands around her husband. And of course, not mentioning, this is a very important part for women today, they take very well care of themselves. Even the average Egyptian woman would wear, this is Hathor, the supreme goddess of love, affection, motherhood, kindness, all the good meanings in
Their
ancient
features
Egypt.
were very delicate and they were very beautiful. I cannot imagine that. I mean, those are statues. You know, when I look at them, I feel that they are gonna talk.
We say
they are
vivid
living
statues,
creatures.
living,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yes.
Back to the makeup and how they took care of themselves. When
Yeah.
you look at the scenes, the dresses they are wearing, the simple
And how smart they
accessories.
were. And the accessories. Yeah.
If you're a queen, you will have, of course, precious stones and semi-precious stones and gold. But even a normal, this is the scene we were talking about earlier. She's breastfeeding.
breastfeeding the pharaoh.
The pharaoh.
Yeah.
But even the normal, average Egyptian woman, Hatshepsut, most famous one. All the musical instruments, by the way, were invented in ancient Egypt and developed later on.
Yep.
Here we see something, Nefertari, the wife of Ramses II, Meret Amun. So,
all of the photos are really indicating or saying a lot. But because we are running out of time, I'd like to return back just even for 1 or 2 minutes with the poems or literature or the romantic way of showing love. Because as far as I know, one of the questions a man is going to be asked in the second life as the pharaohs, the afterlife, as the pharaohs were believing that I've not beaten a woman.
yes.
I was totally dedicated to my wife and my family.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
This is very important again, and by the way, to mention this, there were contracts, marriage contracts. We were the first to invent marriage contracts, and there were laws and rules about divorce as well, who takes what, and we have something apart from the beautiful poetry, how he's showing that he was faithful to his wife. He did not beat her. He did not curse her. He did not yell at her. All these things, there's also a man writing about how he doesn't want his woman after his death to pray against him and wishing that she will pray for him. That shows that her prayers are very important. Also poetry showing how a man is giving lotus flower to his wife, symbol of love and affection. Like the famous scene on the back of the throne of King Tutankhamun. He's sitting in a very cozy, relaxing way.
I cannot imagine how they really knew that giving you a flower is something
Means
that
a lot.
nice and means love.
Yes.
When did this start?
Well, we have many scenes from the early Old Kingdom that lotus flowers, symbol of love and affection between male and female. And later on, it became very common that you see it even in the temples, presenting the lotus flower, like Tutankhamun on his throne. And by the way, in return, his wife is massaging him on the royal throne. That's a scene. They are not ashamed
And baskets
to show,
of fruits, I think.
and baskets of fruits and vegetables, but she is actually holding an ointment or oil, and she's massaging Tutankhamun, and he is giving, in another scene, giving her a lotus flower as symbol of love and affection. And they were not ashamed to show this.
This was my coming question. This was shown to the public.
Of course.
And this was shown even on the temples.
Yes.
I mean, this is something which was not
And respected.
something to hide, I mean.
No. And to wrap this up again,
Yeah, because we have only 1 minute.
they owned property.
Yeah.
And it's mentioned in the Wilbur Papyrus. They owned property, inherited, and this is buy and sell. So actually, they enjoyed lots of rights in ancient Egypt,
No
as they do
surprise.
today.
This civilization is going to amaze the whole world forever.
Exactly.
And we do have a lot to speak about, but unfortunately we're running out of time, so we are going to leave you, ma'am, with a promise to see you again in more episodes to speak more and more about our ancient civilization and about its secrets, its jewels inside.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being with you.
Mrs. Yomna Salama, our Egyptologist, thank you very much for your input, ma'am. Have a very good day.
Thank you.
All right, after the short break, we are going to turn back with more, so stay tuned.